Welcome back to this very special episode of Daily Persuasion. It's an interview, and we are bringing back the very first guest of our very first interview of this channel, which of course is Vanessa Battaglia. She has an illustrious background, I would say a true Renaissance woman in terms of experience from being a contractor and having significant experience with sort of a military adjacent background, and also being an investigative journalist, reporter, and op-ed writer, and doing all manner of different, let's say, socio-political commentary, and also doing some deep diving into meddling and otherwise shenanigans in the heartland of the United States by the United States' enemy, the Communist Party of China. Anything else you want to share with our viewers, Vanessa, about yourself before we get into it?
No, I think that about captured it. I'm making a map-based app out of the Chinese activities, and I hope to get more work done on that soon. So
Yes.
there's all kinds of projects happening here.
Yes, I remember that one of them is that you're pointing out all the various illegal Chinese-owned grow farms, like in New England.
hmm Yeah, and there was just some news just from yesterday that the governor of Nebraska told Syngenta to leave, and Sarah Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, she already made Syngenta leave. So I'm looking at adding a map layer for that, governors that have made Syngenta leave versus governors that still let it be around. But anyway, yeah. So
Gotcha.
got map on the brain.
Very good. Yes, and amidst all of the projects that you have working on, I have observed from you some, I will say, rare yet nuanced commentary on sort of our modern day. It's a combination of a number of things. Sort of the relationship marketplace, the gender divide, the presence and even promotion of second wave feminism amongst Republicans, the history of the various waves of feminism, the girl boss problem that we seem to be having, and all of these topics seem to be recurring ones that are top of mind because every few days there's a new Mary Sue taking center stage, and that's something that I'm quasi famous for, writing what is sometimes considered the seminal piece on the Mary Sue problem. That's something I wrote back in 2022 that put me on a map of a number of people, including Jack Posobiec, who I did those famous Young Humans and Bulletproof books with. And that's something that you have experienced as well, the girl boss phenomenon. And just this week, we have the Attorney General of the Trump administration, Mary Sue Bondi, who always has like the perfect hair and the perfect pantsuits and the perfect presentation, and a significantly less than perfect, let's say, job performance with regard to right now it's the Epstein list and the terrible memo that she recently released. And then we're going back to what happened in February, which is the various right-wing influencers like Jack Posobiec and Mike Cernovich showing up for a special briefing from the cabinet heads in DC, and they're given these Epstein binders volume 1, which have effectively nothing in them and is a totally wasted photo op that really crashed a lot of reputations as a result of that photo op, and that was allegedly, from what we understand, Pam Bondi's doing. So
hmm
we have a problem with girl bosses in America. Meanwhile, this is not to say that all women in such roles are a mess and a half. We have Tulsi Gabbard, who is in fact doing fantastic work as Director of National Intelligence, but she's not hopping on taking center stage for everything. She's actually like doing the job that you're supposed to be doing, not causing problems and trying to, get viral moments like Pam or like Kristi Noem, Department of Homeland Security Director, are doing. So yes, these are some observations that I'm having, and it sounds like you, from your vantage point, agree with some of my own commentary here, Vanessa.
Yeah, I'm so sick of girl bosses. I mean,
What is the girl boss, Vanessa, as opposed to just a boss, be they male or female?
or just a girl, right?
Yes.
Right. Girl bosses are, um, boy, that's a funny question right out the gate. Girl bosses are women who seek out high positions competitively and then also brag about it and also don't do a good job. I think that's the trifecta. I think the seeking out and then also the bragging about it and also underperforming. To me, that's the trifecta of the girl boss I just made up right now. Because there are, like you said, there are women who wind up in leadership positions like Tulsi Gabbard. She's doing really pretty well. we could talk a little more about her, but she didn't seem to especially seek it out, and she's not bragging about it. So uh, by that metric alone, you could say, she's just definitely not a girl boss. She's just a leader who happens to be female. But Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem, I don't know. Um, as you pointed out with Pam Bondi, the whole matter with Epstein has just been terrible from beginning to end, because there was the whole matter with the binders. And, um, then she went on Fox and is talking about, oh, the list is on my desk, and I think you and I were both replying to each other on X yesterday about the cabinet meeting yesterday. And the cabinet meetings, I don't know about those cabinet meetings either. I don't care for them. That's a separate matter, maybe. But at the cabinet meeting, it was really bad. She looked guilty. She looked, I don't know, is that what we're doing here? She looked guilty. She looked, and she brought up the Fox. Why did she even bring that up? She should just try to, just not talk about that anymore. But she brought up how she went on Fox, talked about the list. She tried to say that she didn't mean list, she meant a file. I mean, good night. What, just, but what about Kristi Noem, though? Kristi
Yeah, so
Noem,
it seems like the Mary Sue phenomenon is because I am female, I am uniquely qualified to do things in this job that a man could never do. You might recall another Mary Sue, Nikki Haley said something to the effect of when she was running for the Republican nomination. If you want someone to talk about it, you get a man. If you want it actually to get done, you call a woman, something like that. And
didn't she also say I can punch back in high heels?
yes, something to that nature. Like that is a Mary Sue. That's second
Yeah,
wave feminism, which is
yeah.
I can do all the things that a man can do and better because I'm a woman, with disregard to qualifications, competence,
Mhm.
experience, and it's that trifecta of the girl boss. I seek it out, I brag about it and force myself into the limelight, but I can't actually do anything. And that's generally, it seems like a problem with the diversity phenomenon, both in the left and in the right wing institutions, where oh let's seek out this person and their immutable characteristics are a qualification for this office. Well, you would make a good this because you're a woman. Is usually part of the Mary Sue phenomenon. It's kind of like girls rule, boys drool type of playground dynamics. Um, and we witnessed that with Kristi Noem in the various, let's say, photo op moments where her hair or possibly hair extensions or whatever's going on there are just draped perfectly like a supermodel, and the amount of
Out of a ball.
makeup that's used is probably in the hundreds of dollars per each appearance, if not more. And yet the way that she's holding a firearm in some of these photos is breaking a rule where, for example, her finger is on the trigger and is pointing at the head of the man she's standing next to,
Did she do that?
for
I
for
didn't see
example.
that.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
sorry, I didn't see that.
And other sorts of, let's say, audio visuals where it's like, wow, okay, look at you being all glitz and glamour, and when we actually hear you talking about what it is your job is doing, it's like, oh, this is a photo op. It's sort of like the anti-AOC, right, where she goes to that fence at the border and pretending to be weeping and crying, and there's like nobody standing there. It's supposed to be the kids in cages photo op that she did a number of years ago, but there's actually nobody there. It so Christy and Pam seem to be the Republican version of that, where it's let's set myself up looking like the fierce, beautiful, powerful girl boss pantsuited woman with the perfect feminine hair. Like I can be all things and do all things all at once because I'm a woman and I'm better. And okay, but what are you actually getting done? That
Mhm.
part is usually left out. And then of course there's the shenanigans with Kristi Noem's uh, alleged dog that was in this memoir, and she allegedly shot the dog, and then she blamed her ghostwriter for misspeaking on her behalf. And then she said, actually, no, there wasn't a ghostwriter. I wrote it myself. What are you talking
Blame
about?
the
I never said there was a
ghostwriter.
ghostwriter.
Blame the ghostwriter. No,
Yes.
but no. She blames the ghostwriter for accidentally saying what actually happened, right?
Yes. And then it was shortly after there she said, no, I wrote every word myself. There was never a ghostwriter. What are you talking about? Yeah, so the sort of personal inconsistency. Okay, this is not an ideal individual for this. Now, I want to point out though that she had this New York Times bestselling book that came out perfectly timed for the election, and she was doing a book tour. This goes to show the power of authorship for accelerating your career. Because if you look at the number of the people who are now in Donald Trump's cabinet, we got Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, well, we could Dan Bongino. But then we could mention, of course, Kash Patel. What do they all have in common? All of them wrote best-selling books that are talked about on all the news that Donald Trump watches. And I don't think that's a insignificant point there. Books boost your career, certainly. That's certainly a rabbit hole we can now climb our way out of. Um, but what do
Oh,
we
but could
do
we?
about the girl boss question?
No,
How
but
do we
could
answer that,
we?
Vanessa?
Could we bash on Kristi Noem a little bit more? Because I'm really so sick of her. Could we though? Because there's the dog thing, but also, and it's true, nobody would have even talked about her except that that part came out from the book, right? So I agree with you that nobody would have even been talking about her at all because nobody really knew much about her, generally speaking. But here's my problem. Here's my problem with her. Okay, two more recent examples. Number one, her purse got stolen, and then she goes off and complains that she thinks it was an illegal, which is like that's like a cartoon. That's like a stereotype. And if it were me, if my purse got stolen, I wouldn't let anybody know. I would find a way to send a message to whoever did it to say, remember, I'm the dog woman, but then otherwise I wouldn't let anybody know. And then, also recently she, was, was it rushed to the hospital with an allergy. But then people were saying, oh, maybe she was getting cosmetic surgery, and all this kind of stuff. And allergy emergencies are bad, like that can be really bad. But the problem is when somebody is a woman who runs around LARPing like GI Jane Barbie, that opens the person up to speculation that maybe she's getting cosmetic surgery. And men generally aren't running around LARPing in costumes. And that brings me to my other criticism, because yeah, you said, she's got the big extensions, she's got like a ball cap and the extensions and the big manicure and all the makeup and everything. And if she wanted to actually LARP like a law enforcement military type person, military women wear their hair back in a tight low bun, and they wear minimal makeup, and those are the regulations, and their
Like Tulsi
fingernails.
Gabbard, whenever we see depictions of Tulsi Gabbard.
Exactly, which, is another good juxtaposition. But, that's what kind of bothers me about the extensions with the ball cap thing. I don't really know what she's trying to look like, because I've been around military people for my whole career, and she doesn't look like any kind of military law enforcement type person. It's not convincing. It's like glamping. It's glamping. She's doing the glamping of outfits.
Yes.
She's
Yes.
glamping as a law enforcement leader, and
And yet, I wonder, if, Vanessa, if maybe we are as a society or as a culture, or even at least as news consumers, now not you and I, but like the royal we, are rewarding the girl bosses by perpetually talking about them and focusing on them, when the alternative is a competent individual like Tulsi Gabbard is sort of not in the limelight, right? It's sort of like, if you're not promoting yourself, who's going to promote you? And they realize, well, if I become an obsessive self-promoter and I seek out the job and I never stop talking about it and then I just don't do it, and then if you accuse me of incompetence, I can just call you sexist. How do you beat that? That's a great gig.
yeah, and what's interesting about Tulsi Gabbard by comparison, like a detail that seemed to fly under the radar was that um, after the um, after the strike on Iran, the leaker was out of the office of DNI. The person who leaked that preliminary plan illegally was out of DNI. And I kind of thought, oh, I heard it and I thought, oh, that's kind of, oh, I feel bad for Tulsi Gabbard because I like her, and that's just a bad thing to come out of her organization. And I hope she doesn't suffer any like really, really undue criticism about it. And or I wonder what's she going to do about it. And the funny thing is, we didn't really hear much about that. I didn't. You don't see people pointing all their fingers going, we wouldn't have had a leaker if there were a man running DNI, because she's doing a good job and just kind of flying under the radar. And I give her the benefit of the doubt that she's over there doing something about it. I gather that that person is getting prosecuted, which I think I heard something about that, but not
And
confirmed.
that's something that we don't do with the girl boss, where they're, let's say, the extent to which they market themselves and the quality of their work is inversely correlated. Whereas with just bosses or leaders of men and women organizations, it seems to be a bit of the opposite, where their competence is inversely correlated with their self-promotion.
Right,
And it's not
right.
just that's not just with girl bosses. That seems to be across the board, even in internet marketing. It seems like the best internet marketers have the worst products, and vice versa.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and so like I don't know, with Pam Bondi, I don't know if she wants to just look nice. If she just is an attractive person who looks nice, fine. I think Kristi Noem goes over the top. It really bothers me. Pam Bondi, I don't know. I'm not as offended about the pantsuits or things like that, but she made such a circus out of that Epstein thing that now, what other option is there except to get mad and stomp your feet and what kind of like deny, and it's just not a good look. I don't know. And there, the people out there saying, "Oh, we would have had this if Matt Gaetz were the AG," of which there were many people. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid comment.
Yeah. And to your point, people aren't saying if Tulsi Gabbard wasn't director of national intelligence that the leak wouldn't have happened. I
Right,
never heard anyone say that because she's focusing on doing the job and not,
right,
showing up glammed up or glamped up, let's say, for various interviews.
right,
It's
right.
sort of a gravitas that she has, understanding of optics,
Mhm.
what is responsible, and then sort of complete rejection of accountability that Kristi and Pam and also we see with Nancy Mace, Representative Nancy Mace, right? Where like her story is like, I'm the first woman who got into the Citadel military school, which is all male, and therefore I'm the best weapon against the transgender activist movement. And then of course she gets perpetually caught in lies and over the top, like making a pass at Jack Posobiec, strangely enough, at
Yes,
his
yeah,
random
that's it.
last December.
And
And
she
then,
got her claw rejected by Trump.
yes, that was fun. That was fun. Yeah, she tried to grab him and he reached out and grabs her hand and pulls it away. That was great.
Yeah.
Um, but then she was purporting, speaking of the LARPing again, right? She claimed that when she's going to be going to vote for the big beautiful bill, she's out in her pajamas, which of course is like another publicity stunt. Like, look at me, I'm in my PJs. I take the job real seriously. Like a man would never do that. That's clown show. That's like that's
Right.
being a clown. The man could not do that. Now, someone like Tim Walz would do that though. Like an absolute clown show of a human male on the left wing side would probably do something like that. But on the right, like that's okay to do the clown show thing. And you might remember, Vanessa, that Jack Posobiec caught her in a lie of showing that where she claimed she was at this dangerous gas station at like really early in the morning, like it's all dark outside and it's dangerous. He found that that's actually in a different part of town that's perfectly kind of rural and safe, and not
Oh,
at
really?
all the part of town she's saying she was in. So like they're even sloppy when they lie, or when I got the Epstein list on my desk. Well, what do Hillary Clinton style? What difference does it make?
Yeah,
you know.
and you make a good point about the things where you say, a man wouldn't do this. Okay, maybe Tim Walz would do this, but like a conservative man wouldn't do this. A perfect example of that, because I don't know, we can't really account for what liberal men will do,
Oh
necessarily.
yeah, that's a story.
But a perfect example is like when liberal Mary Sue politicians are crashing out. Like, what's her name? The Gettysburg Address. What's her name? Jasmine Crockett.
Yes, Jasmine Crockett, Representative Jasmine
I,
Crockett.
I'll just forever remember her. That was the Columbia Bugle who put that on X, the Gettysburg Address, when she went crazy like about a year ago, I think, having her strange, Jerry Springer thing. And, what's funny is whenever she has those meltdowns, um, what's his name? Who's why do I bring this up if I can't remember their names? But who's in charge? Who's got the gavel in those situations? It's that Southern congressman. I forget his
Mike
name.
Johnson, Representative Mike
Not
Johnson of Louisiana.
not Mike Johnson. The guy who's in charge of the committee. Anyway, he's a Southern conservative politician. I'll remember his name later. He's Southern, but he tends to say, he says, I don't know what you're talking about. He rolls through a series of really face-saving excuses. I don't understand what you're saying. I don't know what you're talking about. I can't hear you. He even goes to he's like, I can't hear you out of my bad ear, whoever that is who says that. It's it's not anyway. It okay, anyway, you can just cut that out of the video, but it's I forget, but he, the man who's in charge, rolls through all these excuses to give her all these off ramps to like stop her meltdown. He's acting as an adult. But then you have the conservative version of Jasmine Crockett. I won't name them. I don't know. They're just, I don't know who interacts with Jasmine Crockett when she gets like that. It's it winds up being unfortunately like Lauren Boebert and also Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they kind of interact with her on the same level, and they think that they're gonna like fight back harder.
Yeah,
But
it's
you
like a
have
little bit of a cat fight, right? You see
yeah,
that.
it turns into a cat fight. But you have the conservative gentleman with the gavel who's trying to end it as an adult. He's saying, "Oh, I don't really understand what you're talking about. Just please stop talking about whatever that is. I can't hear you." And these are really sophisticated, grown-up ways to try to dissolve a tense situation. Those are good tactics, but the women don't do that. The women engage and they get in a cat fight, and it's really a shame because I don't think all of these people are necessarily like the Mary Sue um, convention, like you're saying, but they engage anyway. And I look at that and think, what did Congress look like 100 years ago when there weren't women in it? Did we have any of this? No, I don't think so. What did they have? Maybe
There were certainly there was more direct language, like in terms of threats and confrontations, and personal and personal attacks. Yes, and it was sort of posturing and a little bit of bullying, as opposed to like screaming and crying and kind of whining. It was
yes.
like direct masculine attacks. Like, this is not acceptable. Well, that's not acceptable. Fight, 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 fight it out, and then the winner, the loser submits to, and then they go forwards, and that's it.
Right, right. Yeah, trial by battle kind of. And if I had to choose between the two, I would go with the former, not the more recent. You know. Anyway,
Yeah, what one seems to be focused on resolution, and the other seems to be focused on, like, let's say,
winning.
feeding the fire of drama, right?
Yes, winning. Well, it's that it comes back to that age-old debate about would you rather it be done or do you want to win? It's kind of like with Ukraine and Russia. Do you want to just be done or do you want to win? Because done can happen much faster. And it's like that when the women start melting down in Congress. The engaging, like you're saying, the men are trying to do conflict resolution and the women are trying to somehow win. They're trying to own the other women or something, but that's not conflict resolution, that's conflict escalation. And it's very sickening to see.
You know
Just,
what it reminds me of? Oh, Vanessa, you have another point. Sorry.
no, just I was just saying, just for whatever it's worth, as another woman, it's sickening to see where I just think don't engage. Just conservative congressmen, don't engage with that.
Yeah. So what we've learned is that liberal men are conservative women.
Yeah.
Or at least, let's say, the drama magnets, those who are attracted to that and sort of cultivate it. Now, you're talking about like the conflict resolution versus sort of like this rallying technique where I got to get the cameras in front of me and I got to get the cat fight and I got to make sure all the popular girls like me and they know that Becky's not okay or Marjorie's not okay and we're okay over here and let's pick sides and it becomes like a drama fest. Um, it seems like what's missing is what is the purpose of this committee? What is the purpose of Congress? What is the purpose of this debate? Why are you here? And from, let's say, the more mature perspective, well, we are here to serve our constituents and make their lives better. Versus, I'm here to get attention and viral clips that I can play during my commercials so that my constituents reelect me so I can keep this job and be like a political celebrity and get a bigger book deal next time.
Yeah.
And what that reminds me of is in sort of modern dating discourse in relation to sort of the relationship marketplace conversation, gender roles, men, women, husbands, wives, etc. There's an expression that is being popularized, which is, what do you bring to the table? And it seems like let's say, self-focused single women and these congressional catfighters, their answer is the same, which is, I am the table. What is the
Mhm.
purpose of Congress? I am me, attention. This is my
Right.
space to get attention, money, power, right? Viral clips look good. Get the cameras.
Right. I'm
Or
not
they
not making the news. I am the news.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
I am the table. I am the news. Like I am Congress. What are we here for? Me. To put on a show. That's why we're here. Um, and it seems like there's generally speaking, organizations like Turning Point, which you and I have both done some things with and appeared at and had some fun with. Particularly Turning Point Action, but also Turning Point USA, their 501c3 sister organization. These, of course, are, let's say, political, social, but also religious and moral and social organizations that talk about a number of different topics. And they regularly talk about marriage and husband and wives and sexuality and dating and these sorts of things that come up regularly by speakers and on panels. And it seems it's difficult to, and perhaps unwise to, decouple one's private life with one's public life and the welfare of the commons. And so we're seeing, I think, a reattachment of the secular and the sacred, or perhaps the public with the personal. And we realize that what you do in your bedroom is not, in fact, just your own business, because who you are is who you are everywhere. And how you do anything is how you do everything. And therefore, the same people talking about political commentary are talking about social commentary and dating and whatnot. And I've seen you have a few takes on the situation and what's going on in the world. And then there's like, but the feminists are this, and then but the red pill guys are this, and but women only want this, and yeah, but you perverts only want that, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of communication going from one side to the next, does it, Vanessa?
What, on the internet?
Both. Internet, real life at these panels, questions that are being asked, sidebar conversations, books, and even like in real world dating apps and in relationships. It seems we have inherited a bit of a pile of extension cords and plugs that need to be untangled and then plugged in correctly wherever all they go.
I mean, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and conferences and the internet aren't going to solve that. So, they haven't, and should we be surprised? I mean, is that what you're talking about, or something else?
I think is that as well, and I also wonder that this there's an expression which is, Twitter is not real life.
Hmm.
When I go out in real life, what I am seeing, like in the internet discourse, I am observing in my surroundings. I was at a conference chatting with a few friends that I had made there, and what we're talking about, I log in later online and I see the exact same talking points that we were all talking about. Right,
Yeah.
that was there, and so there seemed to be a bit of a mirror situation. Maybe one is feeding into the other, let's say, um, and why are there these like dysfunctions in public, politically speaking, and also a disharmony and a dissonance in many people's personal relationships and in dating and marriage and so on and so forth. And what do we do about it? Is I think that's the question that we sort of come to. What do we do about the girl boss Mary Sue phenomenon, or about that men are from Mars and women are from Venus? What do we do?
What do we do about the Mary Sue situation? Well, why why do women keep getting promoted into jobs that men could also do? I'll give you an analogy. I work in defense, and there are some women around, but not that many, because not that many women want to work in defense. And there aren't, statistically, I think it's consistent. There aren't that many women who get promoted into really super high positions. And I think that, to me, statistically, that all kind of makes sense, just because statistically there aren't that many women around, and it's good, and we're not seeking that out. That's like that key element there. Everybody's just there to do work, and we're not seeking it out. So when you see women get promoted into these positions, these really high positions, I mean, I think women being in really, really high, very safety critical, national security positions like that, I think it's almost at times it's kind of like putting libertarians in really high positions. Like libertarians have something to offer, but they shouldn't be in like really, really high positions. But like they have something to offer in different ways. But like what do we do about it? Why do women keep getting promoted into these things? Like really, I wonder. I don't like to criticize President Trump, 47, but I wonder, why did he think this one or that one would be a good appointment for these positions? Um, I've got some theories. Like I've got some theories about Pam Bondi, and the theories mainly are that maybe some things were going to happen that would be disappointing, and it's easy to have a fall woman to draw everybody into the situation to say, well, naturally, if it were a man, that way our heroes can remain intact mythically. None of our heroes have to be slain in our fantasies.
I've heard that described as the Marissa Mayer technique. You might recall a few years ago when
Oh,
she's made the CEO, Marissa Mayer of Yahoo, which
mhm.
was kind of a collapsing company at that point. The idea was we could blame it on a woman. And
Yeah,
that technique has been used since. A company is declining or organization is declining. Let's make a woman the CEO in the face of it so that the rest of us guys can hide behind the scenes and she can be the sacrificial lamb, so
right.
to speak.
I was calling it like a scapegoat. It's like a female scapegoat is like a scapegoat kind of.
Yes.
I wasn't familiar with the example with Yahoo, like you just said, but it makes sense because people can automatically go and say, we wouldn't have had this with a man or we wouldn't have had this with Matt Gaetz. But I mean, the fact is, there could have been other things going on with Matt Gaetz. There could have been other reasons, there could have been some very specific reasons why it's not Matt Gaetz or another man and there's a woman, like the Marissa Mayer. But I don't know. I would put it back to you. If you want to know what we should do about it, I mean, I can think of some obvious answers. I'm not used to speaking publicly about things. I'm just an engineer. I only started writing because I just found myself wanting to uncover information about China, but I'm not used to sharing my spicy or unspicy opinions about anything. So there's an obvious answer about what to do.
What's the obvious answer?
Oh, Joshua, just to like repeal the 19th Amendment. No, that wasn't what he. That
That's it.
wasn't.
That's a Twitter. That's a Twitter is real life moment. Like, here we are,
Yeah,
real
well,
life
yeah,
talking, and
because
that's what they're saying. That's what anons are saying on Twitter.
like Twitter
Right.
is my life at this point. No, but the you have to, going back to my analogy about places where I've worked, you can have women who are qualified, or to go back to Tulsi Gabbard, you can have women who are qualified and you can have women who are unqualified. And you could just try to apply more discipline. Assuming there isn't a Marissa Mayer situation happening here, you could just apply more discipline about it. Or you could just not have the women there. If in a thought experiment, if we didn't have any more women in Congress ever, but it prevented a single additional moment of any Jasmine Crockett drama, would it be worth it? Mm-hmm. You
That is the
know,
question to ask. There's a few thoughts that I have, Vanessa. For the first of which is I would say that you're one of those people who has the competence, and in terms of the amount at which you self promote, right? You have the opposite of the Mary Sue, right? Which is that's all like self-promotion and mostly incompetence. I tend to really like people who they tend not self-promote, which generally means that they're really competent at what they do. And you find that in the engineering profession where you have come from and all the research that you've done into what the CCP is up to, buying politicians in America for $1,000 a head. It's just crazy when you run the numbers like that, as you have uncovered and shared previously. Um, and also, but in engineers like you tend to be systems thinkers, and so you can realize that there's one variable that affects all the others, and if you change one thing, it can change everything else. Or you can change one thing and it changes nothing. It's a sort of a systems fluid dynamic sort of situation, and also unintended consequences, second, third, fourth order consequences. Now, in terms of solutions, what we do about it, repeal the 19th is, from my perspective, a sort of shorthand that we should do something drastic. I don't know that that is used 100% serious at all times. Maybe it is by some like the Nick Fuentes crowd. I know they say that a lot. They say a lot of things a lot, but that's one of the things that.
Did you just hear me to Nick Fuentes? Oh my gosh.
Oh, I said that's who takes it serious, right? As opposed to a sort of,
I think other people do.
yeah.
I think other women do,
Hmm.
actually. But no, I'm gonna have to seriously look into that Nick Fuentes connection before I ever say that again. But no, but people, there are a number of there are I made a thread about this the other day, on X where I live now, but there are a number of different reasons to look at that whole situation critically, because I mean, just to go back to the original question, like what do we do about the Mary Sue, politicians? The only other option is there can be more discipline, or you could just not let there be women leaders, and that kind of falls short a little bit, because then you're just going to enrage the whole crowd to say, well, why can't we have women leaders? Because we vote, and so then you have to kind of get back to the prime mover, which is taking a look at the fact that women didn't vote until 100 years ago. And there are some interesting things that you could look at with that, because, for example, statistically across the country, more women voters are liberal voters. So, I mean, just if you're a conservative thinking about that, it's worth thinking about. Unmarried women vote liberal 3-1, and liberal women are increasingly more single, for all the different reasons of modernity, that kind of cut across the grain of the TPUSA crowd that you were talking about. Liberal women find it easier and easier to be liberal. So, I think it's kind of a self-selecting trend that women voters are more and more and more liberal nationally, and women voters, are probably very responsible for voting in, like, Karen Bass, for example, because women voters tend to. There's another statistic I found that there are 12 states where women vote at a disproportionately higher rate than men, and of those 12 states, 6 of them have women governors. So women also tend to vote in women governors. I'm not pointing to a very specific statistic about that, but I think that there's enough correlation that you could kind of buy into it. And the women governors aren't doing well. Karen Bass is horrible. If you look at the women governors in New England, Maura Healey in Massachusetts, she's destroying Boston and Massachusetts. Janet Mills in Maine is letting all the Chinese drug lords run rampant there. I mean, and that's balanced out by, there are some great women governors. Marsha Blackburn was a great governor. She's a great senator now, and Sarah Sanders is a great governor. But they're really horrible women governors. I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but there are some interesting things to look into regarding the 19th Amendment, and that's only from 100 years ago. So this is not like a thing from 1803. It's just fairly recently,
Sure.
and it's intrinsically tied to. I mean, I learned from on Human that it's intrinsically tied to the Bolsheviks and women's right to work, and encouraging women to work and detach from the family, and getting the right to vote is all mixed up in that. So
Yes, there's other things that you brought up here that I think, in terms of what can practically be done, I think there are some constraints. There are some constraints. And anytime there's like a rule that applies to everyone in any type of a democratic situation, is going to be a problem, because you have the problem of mob rule in every democratic situation, meaning like majority rules, or you need like a supermajority when there's a constitutional amendment, or repeal of a constitutional amendment. Like I think most people would agree that regardless of political persuasion, the income tax amendment has got to go. Okay, that was a immense immense mistake in terms of the damage that has directly brought to every single American worker since the early 20th century. But is a supermajority going to be available in order that you can repeal an amendment? With as much as there is a serious argument against universal suffrage, which was made ironically and not as a joke by women turn of the century, right? The Atlantic magazine had, I believe it was in 1898, probably the most complete, written by a woman, anti-women's suffrage message with the historical context of women's involvement in government, an argument against that. And their greatest argument was, in civilization, women don't have to get dirty. That separates the civilized from the savage. And it pointed out, because at that time, like, that was the period of history where more and more people, through mass communication, mass media, print and radio, and well, not quite radio yet, but you get the idea, print and eventually radio, and books, photography, were able to see and interact with other cultures, from the Indians of the plains to new discoveries in Africa, both sub-Saharan and northern Africa, and the Amazon jungle and Southeast Asian temple and magic, wonderful discoveries. And with what the Western, let's say, public was exposed to the world of the barbaric and the savage for the first time in mass communication. And the argument against suffrage was, all of those primitive societies treat men and women as equal laborers. And in our Christian, sophisticated, upstanding society, women are the fairer sex. And in order for us to be suffragists, we have to say, we have to lower ourselves to the level of men, which we will not do. And so when the state of Massachusetts had a referendum for women, and it was voted only on by women, should we have the right to vote? Something like 98% of women said no. That was the belief, is that women would lower themselves to the level of men by granting, this is the first wave feminism context. Now, it turns out that first wave feminists were also, in many cases, anarchists and communists and domestic terrorists, and learned the same tactics from the Bolsheviks. And so most people don't know that International Women's Day was the launch of the October Revolution in 1917, where all the women revolted against the newfound government there. And the feminist movement of Russia launched the communist movement, and vice versa. And those same techniques and tactics to overthrow a social order were implemented elsewhere in order to advance suffrage and other, let's say, women's rights of first wave feminism, because it was deeply unpopular.
That was another one of my learnings from my humans. Like I didn't, I've heard vaguely, that this is like a communist thing, but you guys really drilled it home with that. And now I go around. I was actually at a restaurant in town here, and the proprietor was like, "Today is International Women's Day." And then the bartender was like, "Every day is International Women's Day." And I said, "That holiday was invented by the Bolsheviks to double the labor force and break up families." And they were just like, they're like, "Get out."
Which is true, by the way. That was largely the first wave, and then second wave feminism. It was a way of increasing the coffers, or rather the ability for individuals' labor to be taxed and increase the tax base. Now you have both parents are working and paying taxes, and we can increase property taxes because now we need more kids, and kids going to school, and there's not much sort of a schooling at home type situation available anymore. But the point I brought up about democracy at the beginning was, how are you going to put this genie back in the bottle, so to speak? How is it possible to untangle this particular thread in a country of 300 going on 400 million people now? And women's rights is as sacred as anything else in this country, or at least what is purported to be women's rights, right? It's similar, like a sister issue would be abortion, and consistently, when it's decided democratically, they can't get enough of it. Like
They're related, and the women's rights and the abortion are related.
Yes.
They're correlated, and they also come from the same underlying factor. which is, and I mean, you pointed this out, the older generation, even conservative women, they find this to be the accomplishment of their generation. And you've made the point that with abortions, women need it to be okay because they had them and they can't take it back now. But also, even women who haven't had abortions still find women's rights and even the ability to have an abortion to be the contribution of their generation. And without it, their generation just didn't really do much of anything. That's
Yeah.
actually like 1965 was like the contribution. I have heard this from women in my own life who are very conservative, who's with whom I see eye to eye about a lot of things and I respect, but it's kind of like their legacy, for better or for worse. And you know, an interesting maybe bookend to the example that you gave about the objections to women's suffrage because we would put women on the same basis as men. Um, Joy Pullman wrote an interesting essay about this about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago at the Federalist. And she's the one who got me into the Federalist. I mean, I'm a big Joy Pullman fan, but um, Joy Pullman wrote an interesting essay. And this was, remember about a year ago or a little more when they were thinking about drafting women, they were thinking about women for the draft under Biden. She wrote this interesting essay where she said it's got to be one way or the other because the vote at the founding of our country, only men could vote because we didn't have a military and we didn't have police forces, and men were solely and collectively responsible for all of the protection and policing of everything. And the vote was kind of tied to that. And then women's suffrage, the 19th Amendment, 100 years ago, severed the responsibility of being in the army, eventually over time, changed from militias to then we have a volunteer army, but generally lots of men always volunteered for the army. Look at the Civil War, look at World War One, World War Two, generally men have always been the protectors. And the 19th Amendment severed the concept of voting from protection. And I had never thought about it like that before. I just thought, whoa, that's really interesting. It severed the two. And so the point of her essay was she said, oh, Biden can go ahead and put women in the draft because we have the vote. And, that would actually correct something that was made wrong 100 years ago. But if in this country, if we don't want women to be drafted, then women shouldn't be voting.
Yeah.
Interesting perspective.
That is, yes. Now if we take that, women can't be drafted, they shouldn't be voting. And another thing is like women have the right to an abortion. Men have no such equivalent right in any way, shape, or form. So let's take that dynamic and then lay it into the Mary Sue problem, which is I should have the rights as a woman that men do, but I don't want the responsibilities of that because that's not fair. That feels bad.
Yep.
That feels mean. And that seems to be the Mary Sue girl boss problem that we're observing. Someone like Tulsi Gabbard, I can't see her making that because we have the competence and we have the self promotion, right? The
Yeah.
sort of situation. Like, okay, that's logically unfair. I'm not going to play according to that. I see like it's true equality versus the woman who says I want to have my cake and eat yours too, so to speak.
What's
That seems
what's
to be
mine is mine, and what's yours is mine.
yes, exactly. And there are enough people who enable that with, but men have always we gotta hold ourselves to a higher standard, and you got to be a man and man up, which results in men having fewer rights than women, which is the current situation in the United States and in the Western world more broadly. But because the narrative was men have all the power historically and women don't, that same storyline is told in the context of this right here. So, well, historically, women have had less power than men. So we need to give women even more power and men even less to sort of make up and balance it out, historically speaking. And I will hear conservatives say that. Men had it good for so long, we just have to make it fair now. Which
Is
is
it?
what? Communism. That's communism.
It's reparations. like gender.
Yes, and that is a very real thing that even conservatives believe in heavily, or at least Republicans, second wave feminist Republicans.
I hadn't really heard that, but that's wackadoodle.
Yeah, and it is truly what they call gay race gender communism, right? If you talk to a liberal why they celebrate gay pride, let's say, and whatnot, and you ask them like, why do you need to celebrate these various homosexual acts,
Activities.
right?
Yeah.
Like if you ask them, you say, well, straight people have never been oppressed. They'll always talk about history, and it's sort of a cultural currency reparation
Mhm.
where we had to stay in the closet for so long that it's only fair we're able to foist our lifestyle in your face for decades now. We've got to get back. It's that revenge, right? Which is written about in what little book on humans, right? It's not just about the equality. They don't want equality. They want revenge. And we see that with various race movements and the so-called LGBTQIA plus movement. We see that in gender dynamics as well. We talked about democracy a little bit earlier, and this is the issue with putting the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, is it's very difficult to get 50.1% of a populace to agree on anything when there are 300 plus million of them. And the person who's able to whip up their portion of the mob most effectively is going to have all the power and be able to call the shots. So in Ohio, back in 2022, so we have one of the most devastating laws against preborn life in the United States here in Ohio, and it passed 2-1 in a conservative state, right? Because far left wing messaging was they're trying to take your rights away. They're trying to take your rights away. Stand up and vote for your rights. And of course, people have no idea what they're voting for, but you hear that they're taking your rights away, and you will go over to vote for child sacrifice
Yeah.
if that's what you believe is your rights are being threatened to do that. And so you have to defend yourself and defend your rights. And this is where we run into an issue where I think something like repeal of the 19th Amendment is probably impractical for the same reason that we see the abortion issue is impractical. And other social issues, let's say, because of the democracy problem where you can whip up a mob to do crazy things and get them into a frenzy and get them moving as a unit to the ballot box and outnumber the competition who don't care as much.
Or, or
Or
it's or it's like, the politicians won't get together to limit terms, which would limit their own terms.
yes,
You
they're
know,
not
and
going to do that. They're always going to vote for more freedoms for themselves, more optionality if they can and if they can get away with it. And I think the liberal, at least the left, understands what game is being played here, and the right generally doesn't. And so people will say that the conservatives exist to conserve the liberal values of 10 years ago. And that really seems to be the case where, like, we'll hear conservatives celebrate. We have the first Indian American second lady. We have the first Indian American FBI director. Ah, like they'll get all excited. And you're like,
and it's and why can't you just like them because they're great? Like those two
because
exist.
I'm not. No, I'm kidding. At least the
Well,
case with Pam Bondi, right?
okay, but okay, Cash Patel is sort of, he's getting drawn up into he was there in the hostage video with Dan Bongino, right? Where they're like, he committed suicide.
Yes. Yes. His eyes
they're,
were,
both,
eyes
they're
were
both like,
bright. Yes. Yes.
yeah. So he's getting drawn up into that, but I still give him benefit of the doubt. But Usha Vance, I like her. I don't know. I
Yeah.
like her. I think she's interesting and dignified. I think
Yes.
she's made.
Dignified and have in possession of a class that is generally lacking from modernity, let's say.
Yeah, she's got style and she's dignified, which is more than you can say for most people, even in that position. So she's like coasting in my book for now. Like she's really pretty good to go. Um, but yeah, but to bring up the things, this reminds me of an argument that I had with a friend like a little like 10 years ago. A friend of mine posted, you know, Janet Yellen has become the head of the Federal Reserve, and not only is she a woman, but she's from New York. And so this was a friend of mine who is also a female who's from New York, and I just replied, and I was like, not only does it not matter that she is a woman, and she's from New York. She's bad, but it doesn't even matter that she's bad. We need to end the Fed. Like, you can't even divide by zero. I don't accept any of your premises at all whatsoever. And we didn't really, that was tough. That was a tough arg. It's tough to argue with old friends on the internet like that, but it's kind of like that. It's like my friend couldn't even really gather. She's just like in for the bread and circus. She's just so excited that she saw a woman's name, and for some reason she cares that the person's from New York. You're right. And people are just like, yippee, a woman from New York. And they don't even care what the title is or what that means. And in fact, and she went on to do obviously a horrible job, but nobody ever, you know, and then she did an even worse job at the Treasury. I don't know. I don't know which she did worse, but people don't go and even get into any of that. They're like just like, whoopee, a woman from New York.
Yes. And then there's this idea also built into that, like, diversity is a good every time, and diversity is our strength, is a cliche of our culture. I believe that this problem will probably, to an extent, solve itself with solutions that don't look like solutions. That aren't, let's say, anti-feminist coded solutions. They will not be
No,
anti-feminist solutions.
it's going to be solved with promotions that don't look like demotions,
Yes. Yes. Um,
which is usually how problems get solved, at least in the corporate world. But
yes.
no, see, I'm curious about that because I was about to say, well, then we need justice. We need bad people to get kicked out. I don't know. Trump did a bunch of that in his first term. He kicked out cabinet people left and right. It was a huge revolving door. Um, but is that what you mean? Or when you say a solution that doesn't look like a solution, it sounds like you're not really thinking about people just getting booted out the door because they're LARPing too much.
I think probably replacement with those who can demonstrate a gravitas for their position that characters like Nancy Mace and Jasmine Crockett and going to the cabinet, Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi have not been able to show. So a gravitas, an ability to save face and give the voters what they want. Like Pam Bondi's fake Epstein binders full of baloney, as Jack Posobiec put it. That's just not. There's no world in that's acceptable. Matt Gaetz would not do that. Like I have met Matt Gaetz. I have talked to him. Like I know him better than Pam Bondi. And that's just not a stunt that would be pulled under his under his purview. Now we can't press escape to go back and undo what has been done. At the same time, though, we think about a long-term solution, and those are really the only ones that can work, generally speaking, when there's a democracy situation. Now we do know that the majority of white women did vote for Donald Trump, so I love white women. Okay, that said, demographically speaking, what are the groups that have been most propagandized into the holiness and sacredness of feminism? Well, that would be boomers, of course. That would because that's second wave feminist generation. That would
Because
be
that
the
was their
next to then.
contribution. That was their contribution,
Yeah.
yeah. Boomers
Gen
and
X millennials, of course, who are children of the boomers, who, the boomers had 4 or 5 kids, and then his 4 or 5 kids had between them 1 or 2 grandkids, thanks to feminism, second and then third wave feminism. And in those sorts of relationships, there's often not like stable marriages amongst the boomers' 4 or 5 kids because of third wave feminism, which is gender roles don't matter, and marriage doesn't matter, and family doesn't matter, and you can create whatever family you want.
then
And
you
then
can
you
just
can be
divorce.
this, or you can be that, or you can oscillate, or you can be bi, or you can be this, or you can be that, and it doesn't really matter, and that sort of thing. And then also with Gen Z, we're beginning to see the split, the turn. This is where I think, on a long-term enough scale, the problem will solve itself. Gen Z that's ages 20, I think it's 23 to 29, they are more liberal than any other demographic. But watch this. Gen Z ages 18 to 22 are more conservative than any other demographic, including senior citizens, which we have as a society not seen before in the West.
Gen Z is incredibly based.
Yes. Now, why is it 18 to 22? Because COVID took their high school away. COVID took their formative years, specifically feminist coded teachers, administrators, school staff, school safety officers, governors, legislators, public safety officials. influencers and celebrities, all liberal and feminist coded, stole their most precious years of their adolescence. Those who were 18 to 22 as of this recording. And by the time that particular demographic has, let's say, something like influence and power, and we have seen the most feminist generations fall away, probably something like responsibility-based citizenship will occur. I did not originate this idea, but I think it's a practical answer to the repeal the 19th idea. When you also recognize, well, there are also for a Jasmine Crockett, there's also a Tulsi Gabbard. Do you want to lose Tulsi Gabbard? And then our is a country of 51% female of 300 to 400 million people going to vote away their own rights? That's not going to happen. So, like, what is the solution here? My friends Michael Gimmerin and Noor Voy, they have both talked about responsibility-based citizenship, where the more civic responsibilities you sign up for with your local, state, national government, the more rights you have. The more, let's say, not like human rights, but like, let's say, rights to call the shots, or equivalent to voting. Because the problem now is a person who has a criminal record, has a negative net worth, is, let's say, a bum, has one vote, and the public servant who is also a multimillionaire, started businesses and employs hundreds of people in the community, they each have one vote. That's not right, because this person is responsible for way more things, and this person is less than responsible for nothing. Oh, and they're an addict, by the way, and just overdosed. Okay, so in no reality are these two people equal. So the myth of all men are created equal, okay, that may be true in terms of human rights and dignity in God's eyes, but given how we live our lives, we become more equal or less equal, and that's okay. So the idea of responsibility-based citizenship is the more things more responsibilities that you're willing to adopt, the more credits your vote is worth. The more influence you have, perhaps the lower your tax burden is. And we can actually think about, what do we want to incentivize people to do? You can just adjust laws and change laws to incentivize, let's say, women to stay home and have children and get married young, and couples to get married. You can incentivize monogamy, these things, you see.
The child votes. Yeah, the concept of the child votes.
Yeah. So the ultra based younger Gen Z characters, when they come of age, they will not have been they will have been inoculated against feminism, against diversity as our strength, against these things. And so I don't believe they would like repeal the 19th. It would be a new system of citizenship that aligns your rights to the number of responsibilities you willingly adopt. So you have a lower tax burden, and you have more voting credit, let's say, if you do this in your community and this in your community. Oh, and also you're married, and also you have more than 3 children. That sort of a society, at least something like that is the future solution, so that women can still vote. But if you're a childless, let's say, wine mom, as some people would like to say, or you don't have any nieces or nephews, or you don't work and you're, let's say, a bum or a deadbeat or otherwise, your vote is worth less. Let's say.
Well, all that's interesting. That sounds kind of like a more modular version of sort of reverse engineering the original terms of voting, like going back to our founding documents. Voting was only for landowners, for example,
Yes.
right? And
Yes. The modern proxy of like the landowner is the modern proxy. So it's not about the sex or the gender or anything else that people could argue against. It's about what everyone can agree on, which is, the more responsibilities you adopt, the more authority you should have, right? Like that's just intuitive amongst us humans.
But even landowning could be put into that formula. It hasn't. Yeah, I agree that the other things are a proxy for the original thing, but it's still just as relevant. The people, I live in a tiny town, and the only people who come to the town meetings are landowners, old people who own their own homes, and just other people in town don't have any idea what's going on. Renters. It cuts pretty clearly across those lines. So that's an interesting, you know, like a, anyway, because it was originally landowners, right? But I think women couldn't vote. But if women were widows or landowners, they could vote. I believe that that was the original arrangement. So if somehow, if a woman was single, but if you had inherited land from your father, or whatever, if you were the sole inheritor of property and you owned land, you could vote. Or if you were a widow, you could vote. So I think those are the original terms.
Yeah, and that sort of became like let's say obfuscated within the feminist movement.
Mhm.
Um, and if you talk to like traditional Catholics, there's an entire set of Western history about like women's rights in society that is well documented in that, let's say, that stream of history that is completely unknown to the modern normie consumer of news,
Yeah.
information, and history and documentaries and whatnot.
But what's interesting about what you're saying though is that this would be more of an incentive system versus like a disincentive system, because
Yes,
you're
that's
saying
right.
that the original feminist talking points are women can't vote, women can't do this or that, and here it's everybody starts with one, right? Like everybody
Yes,
starts with one
exactly.
vote,
Mhm.
but then you get some other sort of like weighted privileges or whatever
Yeah.
if you accumulate these other things. And
And it's based on what you want to incentivize, right? So what are the things that create a flourishing civilization?
mhm,
It's sort of the what is it? Hard times create strong men create good times, weak men, hard times. Gen Z 18 to 22 grew up in the hard times of our culture relative to what was experienced by those who came before and then immediately
right,
after they will come, right?
right,
So they're the hard times of our sort of cross section of postmodern, post-industrial information age America. And they will be the strong men and women who have what it takes to implement a new system like this that gets around the feminist versus anti-feminist, diversity versus trad way with a new system that will probably be rolled out in small areas and then ultimately expanded into something that is closer to a national system that replaces. And it also avoids this. And by the way, we also notice that the most white places in the United States are the most liberal. That's like New England, for example. We have areas that are like 98, 99, 99.5% white. And a liberal will occasionally do a little noticing and they'll say, wow, so this place, they have a 0.0% crime rate. It's 99.5% white. What's going on there? I have no idea. And then just go off. It just like the conversation is over, right? But nobody ever accuses Massachusetts suburbanites of being white supremacists.
what, tell me again about the Massachusetts suburbanites and the,
So
because you said the whitest areas are the most liberal
in New England specifically,
in New
specifically.
England.
Yes, like well, in large populations, like sort of the whitest areas, that's like that's of large populations, that's concentrated in New England, and their crime rates are some of the lowest in the entire United States. And a liberal will notice that and then not know what they're learning, and then sort of shrug and move on to the next
Oh,
thing.
and they won't know what the reason is. They'll say, "Oh, look
Yes.
how low the crime is." It
Yeah.
isn't
Well, they look
because
like they sure need some diversity,
it
huh?
isn't because it's all white here.
Yeah, that could be it. That could be it. But the point is, like, there's a story right now. There's this guy in Arkansas who's trying to start like this, like whites only, no Jews allowed type of, like homestead association or something in Arkansas, and
That's
the Anti-Defamation League is after him, and so is the Southern Poverty Law Center, and all number of things. And he is doing in a very sloppy way what New England liberals have been doing since the 1620s. Right? It's very sloppy. What that's sort of that version of it. Um, but no one accuses New England of being racist in much the same way of the new system I'm talking about. It's it's the non-sexist equivalent of the non-racist 99% New England, analogously speaking, where it won't be let's all be anti-feminists and roll back women's rights and strip women's rights and ban this and ban that, repeal the 19th. That's
it's just adding more rights to people who want to take on more responsibility and be more traditional.
which solves the problem that we're noticing now with the girl boss and Mary Sue phenomenon without being overtly anti-feminist, and therefore creating a mob of 2-to-1 feminists coming out to the ballot box to defend their rights to kill a 9.5 months pregnant, gestated, preborn baby.
See, that's interesting. So because I'm here saying, women are going to keep voting in Jasmine Crockett's and Karen
Yes,
Bassett's.
they will. Hmm. Yes.
But
But are women going to adopt civic responsibilities at the same rate that men
no,
would?
I don't think they will.
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
they, I don't think that they can, but also I don't think that they don't want to. I mean,
Hmm.
do some of the responsibilities include like neighborhood watch and things like that, that kind of
Yes, I
thing?
think that the sort of thing, the sort of like is like civic responsibility, and even personal responsibilities, like being a homeowner, being
Mhm.
married, and having like maybe more two or three or more children, let's say, from the same spouse, and being married for X number of years to the
Mhm.
same spouse. So like maybe each child you get a new credit for your voting rights. For every 5 years married, another credit. For the number of verified volunteer hours you put in per year, maybe it's like 10 hours minimum per week, another credit each year you do that. Like, so you're biasing authority for those who have demonstrated provably the most responsibility, which is just what? Fair. That's the feminist favorite
Yeah.
word. Fair.
Well, it's true, and you're right. These are proxies for the original, landowning terms. It kind of backs into that. It sort of backs into that, and could also include that, but it like kind of augments it. That's an interesting idea. Do you think that the people you think they're going to actually make these laws, or do you think we
Like
wait,
that.
or do you think we wait a bit for Gen Z to cook, as they say, and get older and get into the positions to do that?
We need to see the baby boomer generation do the 40 years of wandering in the desert with Moses and Joshua goes into the promised land type of scenario. We do need to see that because at all of these protests against Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the pro-feminist, pro-abortion protests, what do you see? It's 90% boomers, senior citizens. It's hippies who protested in 1968 against the war.
Mm.
Same
And
demographic.
that's them now.
Yes, that is the second wave. That's the second wave feminists. Let's say very as what you saying. Abortion is their generation's accomplishment.
But even conservatives feel the emotional blackmail leading to like over promoting women because they're worried about alienating the other boomers or the younger, mixed crowd of people who all love women's rights. Because it is kind of like a given. This is not something that I thought about. Honestly, the very first time I even thought about it, I didn't even think about it. It wasn't even like a concept that even factored in for me. But the very first time I thought about it was during the Gettysburg Address by Jasmine Crockett, because I saw that and I just thought, how, I'm not convinced anymore that women should be in Congress. Like maybe we need to do whatever it takes to eliminate that situation. Like
Yeah.
it radicalized me instantly on that topic, and I'd never really thought about it before. And but I think a lot of people who either I don't know how you could watch that and not start to have drastic thoughts about the state of affairs in this country.
That's,
Maybe liberal people are into that. Maybe they're like, "Yes, Queen," that's so sassy. Or, I don't know. And if that's the case, then yes, you have to somehow skew or limit like the influence of those people if we want to continue to have civilization, which goes back to what you're saying. Or, I mean, my thoughts were more draconian instantly because, I'm an engineer, so everything's like a, square peg, a square hole. But I'm like, no, just to get rid of all the women. But
yeah.
but yeah,
That in my mind is analogous to the guy trying to start like the white ethno state in Arkansas, which like there's at this point there's too much energy against something that's that explicit in its vibe. Like the same thing with like repeal the 19th. The reason that is a thing is because of what you've just said. That there's something very wrong with a Jasmine Crockett being on the same level with the same authority as a capable congressperson. That's just not acceptable. No way. That should not happen. This person does not deserve to be here. But in a system where your authority is based on a proven track record of responsibility, frankly, there's probably no Jasmine Crockett. There's no Representative Nancy Mace who gets up there. There's probably no Pam Bondi. There's no Kristi Noem. There might be, and there probably would be, a Tulsi Gabbard up there.
Right, right. But I mean,
But
but also with the distinction that some of them were appointed, but some of the ones you mentioned were appointed versus voted in. So that's
yes,
a little
but the
different.
appointment from my perspective, is because they're women. And it's like, look at that, we can have a second wave feminist, like that's sort of like the Fox News boomer level of understanding is like, oh, she's a woman, let's put a woman there. That's nice.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, again, I don't like to speculate about what Trump was thinking with his appointments, but yeah, but I do wonder, like, what was the
Yeah.
thought process there? Because there can be any number of reasons people get appointed, and it's very possible that what you just said could factor in even in a faint way, even in
Yeah.
a,
And he is a baby boomer, right?
yes,
I
yes,
don't think like I know what the sins of the millennial generation are, and I carry many of them myself. And I think
right.
every generation does, and I think it's our responsibility to fix what we can in our own lives so that we call forth, here's what we fell victim to, and here's what we suffered through. Make different decisions next generation. You will have your own issues to sort through. And it's like if we can, yes, receive, but then withhold and break the generational curse we have suffered from, then we don't have to pass that on, we see.
Yeah. No,
And I think baby
that's
boomers are uniquely possessed by second wave feminism. Because why? Because their parents were first wave feminists when they grew up.
yeah, and people who had their lives severed by COVID, you're right. It's a powerful factor. Well, that's interesting. See, at first when you first mentioned that plan, what was it called? The responsibility.
It's something like responsibility based voting or responsibility based citizenship. But basically, the idea is to recouple your authority to your responsibilities that you've demonstrated you have been able to contribute and hold. And there will likely be a significant, this is what Gen Z uniquely understands. Wait, if you do this, it looks fair and it sounds fair. And because everything is public and we have the ability to track now in mass because of technology. So technology will enable this. You can track demonstrated responsibility and couple it to authority. And so someone who has 1,000 votes has equivalent, this is a hypothetical example, but you get the idea, has 1,000 credits worth of demonstrating responsibility for themselves, their family, their community, their country. And so their accomplishments are literally worth more than the bum on the street with the fentanyl.
Yeah.
So we can finally make it fair, you see.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's not explicitly anti-feminist. It's not, we need to repeal the 19th, or let's say we need to start the ethno-state in Arkansas, which the equivalent of that is New England being 99% white, and no one ever accuses them of being white nationalists or whatever. They get away with it because they don't ever even talk about it. They just have their own method of making sure their preferred demographics always stay that way without being called out.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, and it doesn't call out women, although I see what you're saying that statistically women would probably be less likely. It's an interesting math conundrum because the babies can't come without the women. So
Yeah. And then one of the
see.
possibilities is the more babies a woman has, the more credits she has. So there are citizenship credits, let's say.
Yeah.
Citizenship authority credits or something like that.
I
And
thought J.D. Vance talked about that, like before, like kind of in last fall, like just before the election. I thought he was talking about baby voting credits.
he did actually.
Yeah.
You know who started that conversation was Michael Gimmerin, actually, talking
Yes.
about how the more kids you have, the more credit, the more votes you should get. That's
Mhm.
only fair. And then a bunch of feminists jumped onto Michael for that, and then J.D. Vance weighed in and commented on it and said of Michael's original idea, that's actually a good idea.
Yes, yeah, that's right. That's right. So I mean, it could happen. See, when you said it, I thought, oh boy, maybe JD Vance will just get on it and do it immediately, or maybe we need to wait. Maybe we need to wait
Yeah.
a little longer.
Well,
But
he's a millennial as well, and I think he recognizes that one of the sins of our generation is receiving the downsides of second wave feminism without the upsides, and how destructive that was for us. Again, we'll define second wave feminism as the pantsuit and the pill. That's second wave feminism. Pantsuit, pill, and then abortion. Those three things resulted in something like um, women are just like men. To be happy and successful, women need to act like men, and that means dress like men and talk like men and not be like women, including not bearing children and not doing traditional womanly things.
Mhm.
That sort of is second wave feminism. And by doing so, we become better men than men are. So we're better than men. So there's like this superiority and entitlement that's mixed in. I'm better because I'm a woman, which we see manifested to this day in the girl boss, to bring it all the way back around to our first talking point, which, as you said, Vanessa, is they seek the promotion, they stand in the spotlight, and don't know what the heck they're doing.
Yeah, yeah, and they underperform. Yeah, yeah.
I think we solved the girl boss problem today. Vanessa, what do you think?
I didn't realize you came with a solution. So good. No, I like that idea. You should promote that. Um, unless you haven't, I missed it. But that's interesting. I like those kinds of topics. I like, like the baby voting credit, and these types of things, because you're right. There needs to be some kind of plan.
Yeah. And it needs to be like from the same father whom you are married to.
Yeah,
For example.
paperwork TBD, But no, but there needs to be some kind of a plan, because what are you going to do? How can anybody is delusional if they think there aren't going to be two more Jasmine Crockett's in Congress in the next 5 or 10 years, or they're talking about they're saying insane things. Jasmine Crockett running for what? Running for president, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I don't mean to just pick on her. She's just the worst of them, but yeah, there should be some kind of a plan. And I sort of half joke, although I retract it now with the Nick Fuentes comment, But um, I sort of half joke. I mean, like I said, I
He
can.
is Gen Z. He is Gen Z. Understand, like Gen Z, when they say it, they're not joking. They're not joking. But what I'm pointing out is see the vitriolic reaction that him saying that gets shows that a full frontal assault on the sacred cow of second wave feminism is not going to work in a country of 300 to 40 million people. You need the Massachusetts 99% strategy, let's say, equivalent, which is this recoupling of authority and responsibility as a citizen.
Right, right. Well, yeah. That's kind of the problem with the whole repeal the 19th Amendment thing. Like I mean, I wouldn't have brought it up and talked about it if I didn't actually believe that there was truth there. But you're right that that is probably an insurmountable mountain to climb. Who's going to do it? Just like
Right,
they're not.
because we're in a democracy where 2 to 1 can show up in conservative Ohio and say, this is important enough to me that I think people should be able to kill a preborn baby at 9.5 months pregnant.
I mean,
Like that's actually what happened in the state of Ohio.
I don't think Ohio's that
It won by
conservative.
2 to 1.
Do you think Ohio's conservative? I don't think it's that conservative.
Generally speaking, it is, but the problem is with mob rule, given the democracy situation, you can whip up radical factions into a majority and even a supermajority, where everyone else on the other side isn't as passionate about it, just stays home.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like
yeah.
a voluntary participatory democracy,
It's a,
almost.
it's a Midwestern state thing, I think. But I ask only because I worked with somebody who was from Ohio, and I assumed that this person was conservative, and it turns out no, this person is deeply, deeply progressive, TDS encrusted progressive, and also I went into the bathroom at Dayton Airport. I just like walked into the bathroom, just right when you walk in, and there was like a trans person. There's like a man in the woman's room, and I was like, I just walked into the front door of Dayton Airport and this is happening. This is like something's happening here. So those are my couple of Ohio stories from recently. So those stories are all from the past like year or two. So
Okay, so I have some problems I need to fix here.
yeah, but anyway, no, I just wondered because people say that about Indiana as well. They say Indiana, like a reliable red state. It's really not at all. It's really, really not at all. And I think there's erosion happening right under us that people aren't really noticing or, willing to kind of confront because you can sort of look over here and not over here and you can say, oh, it looks very conservative over here, and that's the same way in Indiana. But Indiana is actually quite that what happens in Indiana is everybody is registered to vote Republican, but they're super liberal actually. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to actually vote Democrat. They vote Republican, but they in their own lives promote lots of progressive stuff. So I don't know. Anyway,
Which is generally a nationwide problem up to and including, in my opinion, the Trump administration,
yeah.
which has a second wave feminism problem. But I believe that the root problem that we're talking about can't be solved directly because you get the mob mindset of you're taking our rights away, we need to stop you, and we need to overcorrect in our benefit. Maybe we should take voting rights away from men, which will be the next thing that they say. That's actually a good idea, as sex-based voting. Let's take voting rights away from men before they do it to us. There will come a time when the left is saying that, by the way.
Yeah, let's not yeah. Let's not actually that's actually a joke from Downton Abbey. Downton Abbey was an interesting show. That's actually a fascinating show because there are a lot of political insights in both directions. There's like the father statesman of the family, and he's like, I'm a monarchist, and it's like that was like the first time I heard of what that was. But there's another scene where the elderly lady of the family, she says, men don't get a vote. The younger woman says, but I need to ask my husband. And she said, men don't get a vote. It's an interesting show from about like 10 years ago. And it's got all these, they lace in these interesting things. But you're right. We don't want them to actually listen to that and do anything about that. Anyway, all right. Well, I'm glad you had a solution. I support it. I'll do whatever it takes to support and endorse your/Michael Quameron solution.
Yes, and we already know that JD Vance, who we like to call 48, maybe not so jokingly, but maybe a bit seriously, is already down with that. So it's in the popular consciousness that this has to change. We can't tolerate this anymore. So it's going to be a matter of Overton window shifts in the direction of talking about recoupling authority and responsibility to the citizenry.
You need to use your connection.
Yeah.
Because, you need to use your connection with the promoter of your book,
Yes, exactly.
You need to, what happened to, you're going to be senator and then you'll be like besties with Vice President Vance.
Yeah, it's a stage. I don't think I'm old enough actually to be a senator in Ohio. I need to look a senator.
You need to
I need to look at that again.
You can start working on that like now, and then this. I think.
Well, why do you think I'm writing all these books, Vanessa? I'm writing these books so that people will know who I am. You see, remember what I said about Hegseth and Cash and Tulsi and them all writing books?
It's true. They all have books, and so keep writing the books. But then you're going to be senator. Then you'll be best friends with Vance because they were going to be like, "Remember?" And he's going to be like, "Hey, I remember." And then you guys are in. You're just going to slide in that plan. You're just going to be like, "This is what's going to happen now."
There's great wisdom in what you have said, and I think that's probably all that we need to say for today's episode. What do you think, Vanessa?
Very good.
Yes, we brought up some problems, and I think we solved them with defensible solutions that sort of appeal to the notion of fairness that the left really cares about.
Yeah. I'm sold. I couldn't adequately defend my solution, so I adopt yours.
That's okay. I appreciate the spirit of yours, and when we've seen other people suggest that, the sort of pushback they get will result in, we should actually take votes away from women, or from men rather, and pull it out in Abbey. Yeah. In any case, thank you for coming on, Vanessa. This has been a great. You're my second special guest, and also the same special guest as the first. So it's just basically, you're my own one guest.
Thanks for having me back, Joshua.
Sure thing, Vanessa. Take care. All right.